I would say most of my discipleship came from quite a Western background, and that's not that people didn't want me to be Māori or Gujarati or anything like that, but they just didn't know how to foster or nurture that part of me. I didn't realise that over time that I started to assimilate myself with that context.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations. I'm Andy Dixon, thanks for joining me for another engaging kōrero. It's a bit of a longer one today, so I'm going to get straight into it, but if you know anyone who would like this episode, please share it with them. Word of mouth is the primary way that people find out about this podcast, and I'm very grateful for all of you who have been part of doing that. Today's guest is Renata. Matt has been a youth worker for a long time and is now studying Christian theology through an Indigenous lens, specifically a Māori and Pasifika lens. We talk about his years working with youth, how and why he got into it, and what he learned about himself along the way. We talk about his exploration of his whakapapa, or ancestry, and what a difference that has made to his life. And we dive into his theological study and hear about what he's studying and why it's bringing him so much life. We also talk about Matt's involvement at Ihumātao. For those who don't know, Ihumātao is an area of land in Tamaki Makaurau, aka Auckland, and it was set for development despite local Māori having ancestral claim to the land. And so last year, a number of people, including Matt, headed to Ihumātao to protest the development and to ask the government to step in. Matt fills us in on some of the background of Ihumātao and why it was so important, and what his involvement was during those weeks of protest. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll be forced to think about things really deeply. This is episode 45 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Matt Renata. Kia ora, Matt. It's great to have you here on the podcast.
Kia ora, bro.
First of all, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? No hea koe. Who are you, bro? Where are you from?
Kia ora koutou. Ko waio, ko Matt Renata toku ingoa. Sorry about my noisy house. We sound like we have a bit of a party going on, but really, it's just my flatmates and my wife. But yep, e noho ana au I naia nei ki Mount Roskill, so I have literally just moved into this whare 2 weeks ago now. But born and raised in Tupoko Te Ika, so in Wellington. Been there my whole life, so born and raised there. And I left there in 2019 to come up here with my wife, Rachel. My dad, he whakapapa's Māori, so we whakapapa to Ngāti Porou, to my marae, which is called Tikapa, and also whakapapa to Ngāti Kahununu, ki Wairoa, specifically from my marae Rangiahua. And also my nana, she was born and raised on the Wanganui River, so we're Ati Haunuia Paparangi, specifically from a couple of marae, but Pungarehu is one of them in Parekino and Kaiwaiki, so they're kind of like kazi maraes. And my dad was born and raised in Waikaremoana, and that was the same with my grandfather as well. Yeah, they all left Waikaremoana when my dad hit college, so they all moved down to Wellington, and my dad started school at Hatapaura College, Māori boarding school, and their matua, their kaiako was a guy named Papa Morven Simon, and so he's quite well known because he wrote many amazing songs like E Te Ariki,
Yep.
Te Aroha, you know, and so he's actually our whanaunga as well. And so Dad finished school at Hatapaura and then met my mum, and so ki te taho o toku mama no India oku tupuna. So I whakapapa back to the west side of India, a place called Gujarat. And my mum was the first generation that was born here in Aotearoa from Gujarat, and just happened to meet my dad at New Zealand Post. And then, they accidentally got pregnant, just a couple of lovebirds, and they were kind of wondering, should we keep the baby or not? And they weren't too sure. And then they decided in the end to keep the baby, and then I was born.
Pretty glad they kept the baby then?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for keeping the baby.
Yeah.
And then a year after I was born, they decided to get married. And then I've got 3 other siblings.
Cool.
And so we're all kind of, Māori Gujarati, all growing up in Loha. And then, my wife, I met her in Wellington just through the youth development scene. Youth work, community development, that's kind of like what we did down there. And so she is Ngāpuhi from Hokianga. She has whakapapa to England and also to Okayama Prefecture. So her father's actually Japanese. So got a few mixes in there, and God kind of told us to drop everything we're doing. We're in the thick of working in youth development, community development, and asked us to come up here and engage in this Indigenous theology study. More specifically, just looking at theology or looking at the things of God, looking at the gospel, looking at Jesus, but from a Māori and Pasifika lens. And we're kind of the guinea pigs to this particular study that we're doing because it's a bachelor, and we're weaving in papers from Kerry College, Laidlaw College, and also Otago University, and they weave them together to create this degree that we're doing. So it's really blowing our minds. Been up here for the last 3 years, started our 4th year up here, and our last year of our studies. So, yeah.
Exciting. Do you have much to do with your mum's side over in India?
A little bit. So, it's been an interesting journey, bro, because, when my mum and dad got together and I was born, we weren't really born into a realm that our taha Māori and our taha Gujarat was encouraged.
Yeah.
So that's really been a thing that's happened since I came to faith in 2005. And it was a very kind of radical way of coming to faith. I was involved in a whole lot of things that I shouldn't be doing, and selling drugs and just in that whole world, in that whole realm, and hanging out with some of the local gangs and just that whole life. And then it was in the middle of all of that stuff where I just cried out to anything that might have been there. And looking back now, I've realised was I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit, and it was a supernatural one, so I could see. And I didn't realise that I had the ability to see because I'd seen stuff when I was a little kid, but it was always negative and bad stuff. But this was the first time I could see the Holy Spirit, could see the Wairua Tapu, and it was, filled with aroha. And then I was like, holy moly, fell in love with Jesus. And I was like, the more I fell in love with Jesus, the more Māori I started to become. And the more I fell in love with Jesus, the more Gujarati I started to become. So it's really just been through my faith in God where I've had to explore these parts of who I am and my God-given identity. And I remember sitting down with my koro, the one that was born and raised in Waikaremoana, and I says, oh, koro, what's our whakapapa? And he goes, oh, what do you want to know about that for? I says, I don't want to sound like a weirdo, but God's told me. And he's like, huh? Oh, far. In that case, yeah, I'll tell you, a little about your whakapapa. And so I was in my 20s by this stage, bro. And as my koro was starting to share the whakapapa, I didn't even know Waikaremoana was a thing. I didn't even know that we were whāngai from Ngāti Porou into Waikaremoana. Like, they never shared these stories. And then my grandfather goes, last name Renata is actually Spanish. What the heck? What do you mean? And then he goes, there's a Spanish explorer that came to Ngāti Porou, and his name was Jose Manuel. And he lived with Māori, and he had 5 Māori wives. And I'm like, sheesh, And then he said, he's married a Māori wife. So, he's got Spanish Māori children living in Ngāti Porou in the late 1800s. And one of them, they gave the name Renata. And I was like, what? I've always thought that was Māori. He goes, nah. And then the male version of that name is Renata. And I was like,
right.
Holy. And then he goes, so anyway, enough about that. I'm going to stop there, and now you got to go and figure out your Indian side. And I'm like, but koro, man, this is like, we're just getting into the juicy parts, man. Like,
Yeah.
So I listened to my koro's promptings, and when I sat down with my mum, I said, Mum, where are we actually from? Where were you born?
Yeah.
She goes, "Oh, I was born in Lower Hutt Hospital," and I was like, "Oh, dumb!" Like I was expecting
Yeah.
some main story,
Yeah.
Oh, came over here on a ship and like, life of Pi, like and
Yeah.
there was a storm and then there was a tiger and
Yeah.
no, born in Lower Hutt. Oh,
Oh.
okay.
Yeah.
But she did tell me some interesting stories about my grandparents and my great grandparents, how they first came over here from West India, and it was like the land of milk and honey. And when they came here, they just had to leave all of their whakapapa and all of their culture and all of their tikanga, their Gujarati tikanga back home, and had to assimilate into what was a New Zealand Western way of life. So they stopped speaking the language, they stopped speaking the whakapapa, and they stopped telling us as all of the kazis and so we weren't raised in it. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting with my mum, and she's telling me these stories. I'm literally the same thing that happened with my koro. I could feel these waves of identity and belonging being spoken back over me. And so now I'm one of the most, like my mum's got, there's 7 siblings. So there's 8 of them all up. And then my dad's got, 7 siblings and there's 8 of them all up. And on both sides of the whānau, especially with my Gujarati side, I'm one of the only ones that are really going hardcore, going, we need to keep our whakapapa back to Gujarat. So
Yeah.
yeah, and we've been like doing a whole lot of research, and like how do I weave that into my pepeha, and how do I weave that into what God's doing in Aotearoa at the moment. It's been very interesting, and then with my wife as well, if I could pop it back to Japan, how does that weave in with everything? So yeah, so that's pretty much the extent of it.
That's awesome. In your early young adult life, you got into the youth work, as you say. What was it that kind of led you in that direction?
So when I was at school, I had a youth worker, and if it wasn't for him and his care for me, I don't know if I would have made it to the end of school. Just someone to process with, and yeah, it was real gutted when he left in the end. But I was in my last year of school, my seventh form year, year 13. So it was a miracle that I'd even got there. So a lot of his help and effort had gone to getting me there. And then he didn't actually tell me where he went. And then I went to watch the Hurricanes play the Crusaders, and I saw that he was playing for the Crusaders. Man, I was like, what the? And I was telling my dad, hey, that's my youth worker. And there's a guy named Ross Filippo.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, and so he was just, to me, he was like a bro. He was an older brother that didn't talk to me much about school. He spoke to me more about what was happening in my life and where am I heading and what do I want to do with my life. So I left school. I became a builder. I was a residential builder. I was kind of in that realm of things, and I started playing rugby for Petone Rugby down there in Lower Hutt, and it just happened that Ross Filippo had come back to play for the Petone Prems, and I walked into the club rooms for the first time, and I saw him there, and I was like, "Fuck! Last time I saw you, bro, was back at school," and he was like, "Oh, come meet some of the boys," and so I went over there and met Tano Umanga and the Mayor Tia Lara, and I'm like, "Fuck! What the hell?" And then he was going, how did the rest of school go, Matty? How's things with your whānau? And I hadn't talked to him in ages. And the fact that he cared about me that much had this huge impact on my life. So kind of fast forward in time, and in 2008 there was a global recession, and my builder actually lost his business. He went into liquidation, and then after seeking God on it for quite a while, I ended up landing on, man, I could probably do youth work, and how much money's in it? Oh, I did a little bit of research. Oh, there's absolutely none.
Yeah, totally.
But could I still be happy, doing youth work and giving back? Yeah, I probably could. So I started there in 2008, and then 2009 I started my journey with Praxis. I don't know if you heard of Praxis.
Yep.
So I was learning under people like Lloyd Martin and Justin Duckworth, Justin and Jenny, Lloyd and Anthea, Rob Baxter, just kind of like all these kind of crazy, gurus and youth development who had kind of birthed youth development in Aotearoa. And yeah, so that's how I kind of got into it, and I started working at an alternative education school So I got straight into kind of Ministry of Education and was a youth worker, teacher aide in there, and then has just developed from there. And so have been doing that ever since, really, up until coming up here to do full-time study.
Yeah, awesome. I love that a big part of you getting there is actually encountering a youth worker yourself, and
Yeah,
that had such an impact. It's like, oh man, what if I could do that and help kids like that, and
yeah, it's
um,
buzzy.
you did some like youth stuff through church and that as well.
Yep.
You were saying, as you've been exploring your Indigenous identity, how did you find that within the church space?
Yeah, that's a big one, bro. It's a huge one. I remember when I first became Christian, and I didn't even know if I was Christian or not because I didn't do no sinner's prayer or anything. I literally did this very raw prayer. There's a whole lot of explicit language in it, just like me just shouting out in desperation. And I have this encounter with God, with the Holy Spirit. And then I'm trying to go, because no one was around when that happened. So I'm trying to explore what that is and what is going on. And a whole lot of my friends just happened to be going to a Baptist church. And so I started going to the Baptist church and just happened to be that church. Could have been any church, but I just landed there. And they started to teach me about the Word of God and the written Word, the living Word. And then all of a sudden I could start to connect with this spirit that I encountered. So it started making things go crazy, bro, because in a good way and in a negative way, I suppose. Well, not negative, but challenging because, another thing was I had the ability to see things. I was a hardcore dreamer, so I would have these encounters during my dream time. I started to be able to connect with things that maybe wasn't your regular connecting. Like I could start to connect with the land, or I would look at the trees and or the birds or the weather, and just kind of I know something would stir me up, and so I would say most of my um, discipleship came from quite a Western background, and that's not that people didn't want me to be Māori or Gujarati or anything like that, but they just didn't know how to foster or nurture that part of me. They only knew what to do, how they could do. And so I didn't realize that over time that I started to assimilate myself with that context. So, for example, start to speak that language. There's a particular Christianese language, and then started going to the Easter camps, and I started connecting with this. So I started to be able to speak that language, and then I think the first time, bro, I realized that it hit me like a ton of bricks was when I got asked to MC the Easter camp. And so it was here, it was in Central. So that was for like the Wellington region all the way up to like Taupo and all that. And so it's a couple of thousand people there, and I'm emceeing. So I run on the stage and I'm like, yo, what up, Easter camp? Give me a yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, give me a kia ora, and then I was just kind of doing this whole thing. And then I finished that first session, bro, and I go back to my youth group, my young adults, because I'm a young adult by this point. And they were all just like, bro, what was that? Like, who was that on stage? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, you're never like that around us. All of a sudden, Homie G Matt came out, and I'm like, wait, what? Oh, far out. I was like, but that's like the normal me, you know? That's me when I'm with my friends or if I'm, playing rugby or something like that. And then I've realized I had completely changed the way that I spoke, dressed, sometimes walked, thought, to try and fit in with my church whānau, because I genuinely loved them to bits, They were the ones that helped me through, like suicidal thoughts and, just whole different way of thinking. It's a different Matt now, and there's a new Matt emerging. So I was like, holy moly. And then when I did praxis and they started to talk about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, I was before that, I was like, oh man, I just think the Māori's got to get over it, eh? And just, stop moaning about treaty this and, we're all one now. We're all one nation and let's get together and everything will be all good. And then I learnt about Te Tiriti o Waitangi from like Mark Barnard, and Danette Abraham, who's Danette Tia now. And all these people that are like, and I was sitting in Ōrākei Marae, Ngāti Whātua, where Bastion Point happened. They're telling the stories, and I'm just literally like sitting on my seat going, what the F? Because it kind of hit for the first time. I was like, God, did this really happen? God, is this why my whānau's messed up? God, is this why so many of my friends, like, even I could have been sent to prison? All these statistics, is this why? And I went through the angry phase, where I learnt about it for the first time, and I was like heartbroken. And then I started to look at my church family and go, wow, yous are so separated from the story. How come yous haven't engaged with this? And then I remember I went and I called a meeting with the senior pastor and like the elders, and I was going to talk to them about, oh no. And this is kind of like me and my angry Matt phase, so I hadn't quite hit that point of forgiveness and healing and reconciliation yet. And I sat down with them and I said, how come I'm one of the only Māori in the church? We're in the middle of Lower Hutt City. Why does our church still look like this? Like literally, let's go have a walk out the front of the church and look at who's standing on the street compared to what's happening with our church whānau. Why are we so disconnected? What's this all about? And so anyway, we had the meeting and I feel sorry for them, because they had to deal with angry Matt. And then a week later, my senior pastor came back to me. He goes, can I have a meeting with you, Matt? And I was like, yeah. He goes, you're 100% right.
Wow.
I was not expecting that. I was expecting to get told off or something. And then I found out that our senior pastor that we had, well, the last place he was pastoring was in Ōrākei Baptist, in Ngāti Whātua or Ōrākei. And he was like, you're 100% right, Matt. He goes, we've got an issue here. We've got a huge issue and we need your help. And he's like, do you want to explore about jumping on the team? I was like, wait, this is not what I was imagining. This is like, so we did like I don't know, maybe it was like a couple of months of trying to discern what that was, because he didn't even know what he was saying. He was like, do you come on as this role? Are you the community pastor? Are you the youth pastor? And I'm like, look, I don't know. And he goes, well, we've got to seek God. And then God gave us the answer. So, yeah, so that year I ended up being employed by the church and looking after the young adults ministry. And then slowly our youth pastor left. And so I took on the youth pastor and young adults ministry. And quite soon it was becoming evident that my way of rolling was way different to what the church has ever experienced before. So all of a sudden we've got, young people that are of all different shapes, colours and sizes that I was connecting them with, because previous to doing that for the church, I was doing youth work out in the community. I was down at the youth centre, hanging out with some of the young ones, taking them down to the beach to do some bombs, and have some fish and chips on the beach, find out the homeless, or, come from very, very just broken home context and stuff like that. And now I'm doing mahi for the church. I've still got all these relationships. So they'll come visit me in the church office. Next thing you know, there's like all these like young kids sitting on the ground, like just chatting to me. And the office is kind of like, Matt, you can't kind of keep having these guys in here like this. And I'm like, that's true. It's true. I don't want to tell them to go away there. And so they ended up giving me my own office. And I had this huge hangout space. And it was very evident that things were shifting and changing. And I started to take a lot more care of our Māori and Pasifika. I was taking an extra effort because I could see that they kind of always get left behind or something, just even things like, like just whanaungatanga, like having a connection with someone. And I took over a ministry of like about 30 young people, and then within like 2 years, we're taking like 120, 130 to Easter camp. So it just turned into this big, huge thing just because people were feeling connected in, they were feeling loved. But in the end, the services couldn't really do it for them. So their form of church was us doing bombs down at the beach, having fish and chips, or having a jam sesh after worship practice on a Tuesday, whatever. So it was very, very conflicting. And then, yeah, and I think probably one of the biggest things that happened, and I say this with a lot of aroha and respect now. I had an encounter when my nana, she passed away. So she was the one from Wanganui. This is going to sound really weird, but I started to have encounters with her after she passed away. So she'll turn up in my dreams, and it looked like her, felt like her. She looked not like the older woman that I remembered her to be. She looked like this young, stunning version of my grandmother. And we wouldn't be having conversations like this, but it's almost like she could read my thoughts and I could read hers. And was, in a weird way, passing on messages to me of there's some unfinished business in our family and we need to finish it. We need to bring more of God into the life of our family. So I'm like kind of having all these things happen and telling my dad. He's like, how do you know about these things? I says, Dad, I don't want to sound like a weird fella, but I've been encountering your mum, Nana, after the passing. And he was like, what? How's that possible? And so I go and tell my senior pastor because, I'm now the youth young adults pastor. He's the senior pastor. He's my line manager, whatever. And they were really just like, Matt, you got to be careful with that stuff. You shouldn't be like worshipping ancestors, or you shouldn't be talking to them. And brings out Bible scriptures about, Saul. He goes to see a medium, summons the spirit of Samuel, and Samuel rocks up like it's the spirit of Samuel. And Samuel just tells off Saul, you dongy, you're not meant to do this, and shouldn't be. And so I'm like, oh no, I have sinned against the Lord. I did not mean to do this. And they were like, it's all good. We can pray for you. We can deliver you. So I'm like, yes, deliver me. So they're delivering me of these things that are. They don't really know what they're praying, but of my Māoriness and of ancestor worship and intergenerational curses. And I'm just like, yes, cleanse me. I'm just taking it all in. And then one of the things that happened was I get to Bible college. And then now all of my lecturers are starting to talk about, does anyone have connections with their tupuna? And I'm like sitting there going, oh no, I don't want to expose my sinner self, And they're like, does anyone? And I'm like, yeah, I have, but I've got prayer for it, so you don't need to worry. I'm cleansed, I'm delivered. And they said, check this story out. Peter, James, and John, they're going for a hikoi one day, they're going for a walk, and they go up the maunga, they go up the mountain, and those three are the tightest of Jesus' 12 disciples. They go for a hikoi one day, and boom, they see Ihumātao, Jesus standing on top of that maunga, and he's talking to two of their tupuna who had passed away hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before. It's called the Mountain of Transfiguration. And then they exegete the text, bro. So they're getting into the original kupu that the scripture's written in, and they're exegeting it. Peter, James, and John, they're kind of freaking out, like, have we died and gone to heaven? Or are we still here on earth seeing almost like an open heaven? Or is there a portal between heaven and earth that's opened up? And not only that, there's no Facebook or Instagram or anything back then. So they've got no photos, no reference points of what their tupuna looked like. But they knew instantly straight away that was truly Elijah and Moses who was standing on that maunga of Ihumātao. And they are strategizing about what's about to happen in the crucifixion and how the disciples and everyone's meant to handle themselves and what's the strategy moving forward. So they're having wānanga on the top of the maunga. And so they're like, you Māori have always had these beautiful connections with your tupuna. And there is a bit of a line there, of, well, we shouldn't be praying to them. We shouldn't be wanting this open access and praying to our tupuna. But there's a moment where Jesus will be standing on that maunga, and he will allow a moment for you to connect with your ancestors in such a way. So I walk away from that moment, bro, just like mind blown. Whoa, man, I like hid that part of me for years and years. I actually shut it down, bro. I shut that whole thing down. And it isn't until I'm doing this whole Indigenous theology thing where I'm going, man, I've got so many young people that I need to correct. Because I was teaching them all of this, and I say maybe a colonized theology, or maybe not colonized, but it's just like maybe just a Western theology. It's like a totally different from the way that us, East Islanders from the East South Pacific, roll.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, let's talk about the Indigenous theology thing, and as a disclaimer before we get into that, for the listeners out there, like when I say Indigenous theology, I'm not saying Indigenous theology as opposed to ordinary theology, or because you can get this idea that there's theology and then there's like Indigenous theology and then there's womanist theology, or there's all these sort of subsets, but then there's just normal theology. And I just want to name that for what it is, and that actually a lot of what we've been handed in our traditions is really white Western male theology. That,
Yeah.
And that's not saying it's bad. It's just naming it for what it is.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, so tell us about how's the study going, and kind of what are your key areas of focus for that?
Yeah, so how's it going? It is challenging because I've never written so many essays and stuff in my life. In terms of the learning itself, it's pretty awesome. I think we're at an interesting time in the life of Aotearoa where there's a whole lot of theologians and lecturers and teachers that are very open to what God is doing with Māori and what God is doing with Indigenous peoples around the world, and wanting to see theology from another lens. Because you're saying before, you got the Western lens, then you got the Eastern Orthodox lens, and then you have a Maori lens, and then you got a Samoan lens, which might be different from the Tongan one, which might be different from the Solomon Island. So you got all these different lenses. So it has been so enriching. It's been so cool to even have the opportunity to explore these things. Like my last assignment was on the colonization of time, and is the Maramataka, which is the original way of reading time for Māori, so it's the Māori calendar, is the Maramataka relevant for the Church of Aotearoa in the 21st century? And exploring some of those things, like what about Matariki? This is the first year it's going to be a public holiday. What does the church think about that? Is it demonic? Is it, or what is it? Actually, what is it? So we get to go down those lines and explore. Even just looking into the whakapapa lines that feed the Pacific. So because there's a whole lot of knowledge and thought and spiritual beliefs that have been brought with them from these different areas into the Pacific and actually end up making up Māori. So I've been doing a bit of work for World Vision, and the Canadians from World Vision had heard about our work that we've been doing with Te Tiriti o Waitangi, with mana whenua, tangata tiriti, tangata whenua, and they asking for help. And I said to them, man, I can't help you guys. I don't even know the stories of your land. I says, what does Canada even mean? And then, long story short, found out that Canada is actually pronounced kanata. Kanata. And kanata is their word for people or tribe. So that's kanata. And then you go over, do a hop, skip, and a jump over to Hawaii. That's kanaka. You go over to the New Caledonia, they say kanak. You come over here to the Cook Islands, they say tangata. Come over here to Aotearoa, we say tangata. That's the name for people. Or kanata is their name for people. And so on that west coast there of the Americas, you had all these waka going from there also into the Pacific. And it was like these highways, bro. Like Uber waka. all over the place, just sharing knowledge and information and kai and stories. And there was a whole theology behind their world. And then have come to understand that they also knew the Creator. They understood who the Creator was. And not only that, the Creator had a relationship with them and was revealing things to these peoples of the Pacific, of Hawaii. Maybe it's safer to say Hawaii. I don't know. And there's this huge lot of people that were so interconnected. Like I even found out my waka from Takitimu. So you know how I was telling you I was Ngāti Kahununu, ki Wairoa. So our waka there is Takitimu. And Takitimu was also the waka for Kaitahu. But my waka Takitimu was actually built in Samoa. Out of Samoan resources and timber. And that waka was filled with Samoans and Hawaiians and Tahitians. And they ended up coming to Aotearoa and become Māori. Or Ngāti Kahununu. Or Kaitahu. And for me, that blows my mind because I'm going, we are so woven and connected into the story that God's up to. So what was God telling them back then? And what's he telling us now? Because surely all of those things can't be lost, we can't let it go extinct like the huia. Surely it's just there behind the veil and we can grab hold of these things. It's kind of like God giving us like a trail to follow. Remember, you guys are from here. Remember, I was already talking to your ancestors. But it wasn't until the gospel was introduced, once it had the introduction of Jesus, that they were like, oh, we know the Father, and now this is the Son. Okay, we've got the full picture now. We've got the tokotori tapu, we've got the 3-in-1, we've got the Trinity now. And so that's why things exploded in our land with Māori. Because they're like, oh, we know the Creator. But now the key part is the Son, who died on the cross. And so you might have heard of that tohunga from Ngāti Kahununu, Toiroa, who prophesied the coming of the gospel before it came. So, yeah, Ngāti Kahununu is one of, I want to say, he's my whanaunga, he's my tupuna. But, he starts to say these things about, it's probably the oldest name of Jesus, written name of Jesus you'll probably know, which was before Captain Cook came, was Tama Iroro Kutia, the son who was killed, or the son who was sacrificed. And he's a good God. And so you've got all these, like, that didn't just happen to Toiroa, but, same way it happened for me, having dreams and visions and, like the foretelling of these things to come. So as soon as it rocks up, Māori are kind of like, we recognise this. Not only can we just read that Bible and know that that's the right thing, because that's probably, a lot of how Pākehā would interpret it, but they were like, we can see it. We can see the Wairoa tapu, like I saw the Wairoa tapu. We can see these angelic things you're talking about. We can see these demonic things you're talking about. Now, through the gospel, through Te Rongopai, we actually have the power and ability to be able to remove these things or pray in more of these things. And so, yeah.
I think all of that's really good for those of us who are Pākehā to hear, because with a white Western framework, you can feel like God came on the boats with the English, that the English brought God here. But actually, I've got a poem that I wrote a couple of years ago exploring Otutahi around Christchurch and the story of God through this land. And one of the themes of it is actually Wairoa tapu has always been here. And you've got these stories, you've got these prophecies, you've got this way of being that connects to the divine that was well before there was any Bible over here or any, missionaries or, but like you say, those things married together really well. So, I think that's really powerful. One last thing I wanted to just, I don't know if you can briefly touch on it, but one thing I wanted to talk to you about was one place where, your taha Māori, Christianity, everything kind of collided more publicly was at Ihumātao. And for those we got some overseas who wouldn't even know what that is, but do you want to just give us like as brief a background as you can on what was going on there in terms of why were people there? And then also, how did you get involved, and what was your part in that?
Yeah. Okay, so I got accepted for a young leadership development conference over in Japan. And one of the people in that delegation of 12 was Pania Newton. So that happened back in 2016. And she only just left Rotorua to move back to Ihumātao. This was 8 weeks over in Japan doing this young leadership development conference. And, when you spend eight weeks with someone, you start to have deep kōrero. And so Pani would ask me all these questions, why do you believe in the colonized God for? And I'm like, how dare you? And she's like, but think about it, bro. Like, you believe in the colonized God. And I was like, oh my gosh. And we're like be butting heads and all this stuff. And we actually became best mates because of, the raru that we have. And then I remember she told me the story about Ihumātao for the first time. And I remember God specifically slapping me hard, going, I need you to just shut your mouth and listen to her. And then she told me about the story about how the Tainui waka came over from Tahiti, or more specifically from Moria, the story of Hape, and how he came over here on the back of a sea creature named Kaiwhare, or some stories say it was a big manta ray, and I don't know if you know those stories, but the first place they land in all of Tamaki was Ihumātao. And I was like, whoa. She was like, yeah, we've been here for nearly 1,000 years. And then only 160 years ago, because of this crown government and a misunderstanding in Te Tiriti Waitangi, they confiscated it from us. And so all of our tupuna that tried to go back, where did they have to go? They had nowhere to go. And so the ones that did return, well, they arrested them to put them where? Oh, flip, we have to build prisons. And so they go and lock them up, and you get this intergenerational trauma of prison and, justice and all that stuff. And, they build the airport there, and they weren't supposed to build it there because a whole lot of our tupuna were buried, but they built it anyway and put all the bones of our tupuna in a container and left it in front of the marae and said, you guys deal with it. It's like,
Wow.
What? One of their maunga there, Pukitutu, this huge maunga that came out of the water. Well, they excavated the whole maunga, so now it's a hole in the ground. And I'm like, wait, so you use that maunga in your pepeha? She goes, well, we don't do it anymore because it's a big hole in the ground. They used it to build the roads of Auckland. And I'm listening to her just getting so convicted, having that same feeling I had when I was at Ngāti Whātua, when I was at Orake Marae, of just the pain and going, how has this happened to our people, and how has no one heard about Ihumātao? So by the time that they were strategic over all of those years to build up a base of people that knew the story, that knew the truth about the land. So as soon as they got evicted, they already had the strategy in place, and they decided the strategy they were going to take was the strategy they did at Parihaka, which is from Te Whiti and Tohu, who based their whole peaceful resistance on gospel principles. That's what they chose at Ihumātao. So I remember we went down there the first night. Yeah, it's just crazy, bro. It's like thousands of people just walking around there. Night time, there was no lights or anything, and we were just down there. And then we just had our first karakia, our first whakamuimiti down there. We just did it. And everyone else jumped in and sung their waiata and did their karakia. And then the next night happened, and the next night, and I was like, far out, this is crazy. Whatever's going to happen, I don't know what's going to happen. And then I was sitting at a dinner. I was in this flash restaurant, and the Wilberforce Foundation were holding a dinner there. And I remember we got the news that Jacinda had, put a stop on the developments. And so we were all celebrating, like, yeah, let's go down there. So we went down to Ihumātao, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. And it was kind of like a bit of a relief that, the efforts had worked. And then I saw my friend Pania, and she just looked tired. She looked exhausted, and she just came straight up to me. And she had like a whole lot of people with her. Like there's like young girls that were wanting to take selfies with her. She's the next Dame Fiona Cooper, and got the media wanting to get something from her, and got the whānau pulling her in the other direction. And she just comes straight up to me and she was like, bro, can you pray for me? And I was like, just right now, here in front of everyone. Because because of the conflict we've had in the past, she wasn't very open about that stuff before. And now she's asking for it. And I was like, kei te mōhio o koe, i mōhio o koe i karaki au i runga i te ingoa o ihu karaiti. So, I already know you already know. The only way I know how to pray is in the name of Jesus. She goes, that's what I need. Can you pray for me? So, bang, give me the open door. There's me. I just grabbed her hand, put my hand on her shoulder, and I just started praying over her. And I was praying God fill her up with life. I was praying. I don't know what I was praying, bro. I just thought it was like, blah, blah, blah. Protection, for her, for the whānau, for the whenua, for the marae, for tangata whenua. I just started prophesying. God, I'm praying this into the land. I'm praying this. Can you push this? Can you make this happen? It was just like things that I was like, I'm just praying in faith here. God, can you please help them with these things? And can you do this? Can you move mountains? And when I was praying for her, she was just taking these deep, big breaths. And then as soon as I finished praying for her, she just opened her eyes. And she had like this glazy look over her eyes. And she was like, thank you so much. I needed that, bro. And then she goes, this Sunday? Yep, this Sunday. She just decided it on the spot. This Sunday, we're going to commit the whole day to church. We're going to have whakamoimiti. We're going to invite all the different denominations down and they can pray on the land. And I was like, good stuff, Pania. You mean? And she was like, yeah, bro, and you're going to lead it. And I was like, there ain't no way I'm leading that, Pania. She was like, please, bro. She's like, you represent neutral ground. You don't come in here waving your Christian banner.
Yeah.
You just do it. You get it done. And I was like, Pani, I've got an assignment due on Sunday. I got to get my assignment done, man. And she's like, bro, please. And I says, look, if you're being serious about this, I already know you have your own kaumātua, you have your own kuia. You've got your own ministers here. I says, you go down the hui down at the marae, because they were having like hui every night, about 300 of them. And if they want it to happen, then it can happen. If not, then we won't do it. So she blooming goes down there. They all agree on it. She comes back to me. Can you please lead the services? And I'm like, oh, flipping it.
Yeah.
So I just felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, bro. And it was like, fuck, I don't even know how to speak to the old Māori properly. And so anyway, bro, put the word out there to, the guys from Te Rautini and Jay and Salvation Army, Mihinare, Anglicans, just anywhere and everywhere, bro, just blasted it out. Keith Newman chucked it on the Bible and Treaty page, and we had our first ever whakamoimiti down there, bro, and it started at 7 in the morning and went till 7 in the evening. And it was just 12 hours of karakia, like just people coming down there. It was crazy, bro. And I remember in the thick of all of that, I was like, I've been a Christian for the last 15 years. Why did my church never set me up for this moment? Why didn't they teach me how to minister to my own people? And there were so many things I was doing down there, bro, because I was just doing cut and paste from what I know from church. And I felt like I was colonizing my own people, bro. I felt like a Pākehā with Māori skin on. I felt like a Pākehā with a Māori korowai down there. Just, it was like, once you're finished, he honore, and you're finished whakataki te hau, and what else is in the kete? Oh, flipping, it's just shout to the Lord.
Yep.
It's got darling chicken there. Oh no, what else are we going to do? And then so we had to have a quick kind of rethink. But yeah, bro, we just committed to going praying down there every Sunday and every night during the week as well. So it was absolutely nuts. And they won't declare it very loud, but they will tell you if you ask them to their face that we had a huge impact on them down there. We had people that really hated Christians. And by the end of, like, I don't know, maybe the second, third week, we had these guys coming and they were praying with us, and they were singing our songs with us, and it was just really, really amazing, bro. So, yeah, now the current result is that the Crown's brought the land back, and now they're giving it back to mana whenua. They're just
Yeah,
putting
awesome.
together a team full of people to, and we weren't praying, God, give the land back. We were going, God, let your will be done.
Yeah.
And so he was just working in the hearts of all the people, and different circumstances and situations happened down there that I don't really want to get into. But it was like God moved mountains. And then all of a sudden, now the land's come back as a result of all the stuff that's happened down the track. So it was interesting, bro. You had, I saw the Church of Aotearoa gather down there, and no one was, waving their own banner. You had the Ringatu Church down there. You had the Ratana Church, Pai Māori there. You had the Samoan, Tongans. You had Anglicans. You had Catholics. Like a whole lot of people, bro. And it was just like we came together in power for a common purpose, and that was for God's will to be done here on earth as it is in heaven, here in Ihumātao as it is in heaven. And we got given some gems from that moment, bro, that we think actually God's going to start to deposit in the Church of Aotearoa at the moment that we're not currently seeing. And yeah, I think the church has got a long way to go, but I think we'll get there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh man, I could talk to you about this for ages, but we better wrap it up. So yeah, I just love your heart for your people. I love your heart for finding God in whatever situation that you're in, and whether it's youth working, whether it's the kids that don't have hope, whether it's having those battles with Pania as she challenged you about your your colonized God or whatever. And I love how all those stories have shaped you, and the heart that you then come from that with. So yeah, thank you for who you are, and thank you for what you're doing to help to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
All good, brother. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe, Andy. Yeah, thanks for even thinking about getting these stories out there, because yeah, sometimes I feel, yeah, it's interesting holding all these stories kind of in here. So, to be able to share some of the treasures around is a blessing. So, yeah, thanks for putting time and effort into doing this, bro. Kia ora.
Oh, my pleasure.
Hello, hello, heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
Kua tēnau pai tō kōrero, Matt. Such a beautiful and honest conversation. It's so beautiful to hear the excitement and life and energy that flows out of Matt as he talks of his journey of discovering his identity, both ethnically and spiritually, which of course is one and the same journey and not held as separately as those of us in Western culture would generally hold them. I love how much can be learned by allowing ourselves to see things from different perspectives. It can be challenging if it's new, and it might even sound weird and feel wrong to us. But I think one of the most important things that I've learned is just because I'm uncomfortable and it feels awkward or strange doesn't make it wrong. In fact, that's often the space in which we can learn the most, if we lean into our discomfort. So thank you, Matt, for taking us there today. Matt, you're an amazing tāne with so much aroha and rangi Māori. Here is a blessing for you. Matt, may you and Rachel grow more and more in yourselves and your marriage as you continue to follow what you faithfully hear Wairoa Tapu saying to you. May you continue to have Ross Filipos in your life, who are interested in you and who care about you enough to check in on you, who cut through the crap to ask about what really matters. And may you continue to be that kind of person for others, making a difference in the lives of those around you just by being yourself, like you have done with youth, with your church whānau, and with those at Ihumātao. May you continue to find yourself in spaces where you, being authentically Māori and authentically Christian, helps to build bridges and brings peace and reconciliation between those within the church and those who have good reason to be wary of the church. The more you engage with Jesus, may you find more of who you are as Māori and Gujarati. And the more you discover yourself as Māori and Gujarati, may you find more of your identity in Christ Jesus. And may this journey never stop. And lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strawn for the music and Rangi for the karakia. Connect with me on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find me at downtoearth.conversations on both of those. And I'd love it if you could rate the podcast on Spotify or iTunes and help others find the podcast. Join me next time when I talk to mental health advocate and pioneer Jen Mora of Voices of Hope. Jen gets vulnerable with us about her teenage years, which included anxiety and severe OCD and eating disorders. And she shares some of what her journey to a more healthy space has been like. We also talk about what she does now to be a positive voice in the lives of others who struggle. It's another amazing kōrero. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Humai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangi a mātou, I